All right. Well, anyway, it's great to be here, guys. I said I wasn't going to get a haircut until we were in person at Cannes 2022, so now I can go home and whack it off. No, it's really good to be back. I tell you, I miss you guys. It was fun to do it online last time, but in person, it's just so much better how we get to make our reconnections, meet new people, have new ideas shared. And man, I've learned a lot at this meeting. This has been one of the best ones ever. So congratulations to the organizing committee for all the great things that they've done. You know, it's kind of funny to be at a nutrition forum because I really started as an infectious disease person, trained with Craig Green, the first kind of the Craig Green infectious disease book, and was going to study infections kind of only, and then became a little bit eclectic over time, liking a lot of different things, and being toxoplasma was my first organism. I got kind of interested in cats quite early, and then really lucky to start hanging around with Andy and Tim Grifford-Jones and a bunch of the folks on the Europe side and the cat specialties, and now we have Petra Scherna and Allison. We've just got all these great folks that we get to work with studying different diseases in the cat. We've been quite fortunate to get to work with many companies in this little nonprofit center that I have as part of my just my introductory disclosure type things. We do generate income for the center from donations from many different companies, and Purina has been quite active in that as well. They helped us remodel a bunch of labs when we first opened the center. And then our really big thing right now is that we actually gather dollars and then share those with the young faculty with a competitive grant process, and that they have to have a vet student as part of the research team, which is really helpful because hopefully that will advance the sciences in the future. But because of that, and because of being eclectic and doing cat vaccines and cat respiratory disease, cat diarrhea, I've gotten to work with a lot of companies. But as many of you that have known me in the past, I call it being slide worthy. You don't get a product on a slide unless you made a publication. And then obviously the institute pathway is will be product agnostic unless there's some sort of key paper to talk about today. But anyway, thanks to all those great companies, including our friends here at Purina. So for me, where it really became a thing was, some of you might know Miranda Spindell. She was our first shelter resident at CSU, and I got to lead that program. And then our second one went on to work for the ASPCA as well, Elise Gingrich. But how that ties into the talk is I was one of those folks that I would do balanced research. We occasionally would do a vaccine study. We would need to adopt cats from a research facility, do the study, and then rehome them. We're a non-fatal research group. But then I got to realizing over time, if it's not a USDA or FDA monitored study, we have lots of animals to potentially study just down the street. We run the shelter program in our group, Rebecca Ruck-Galley and I, and we have this ton of great shelters. I live on the Front Range of Colorado, so right against the Rocky Mountains. You look that way and it's flat. You look that way and it's the Rockies. We've just got a really powerful shelter group there. And so they're all against these numbers. Obviously, all of our friends in our shelter medicine team want to adopt every cat, but not every shelter or rescue is no kill. And so just thinking of the numbers, 500,000 cats is a lot of good friends, going before their time. And so cat relinquishment is quite a big deal. So bottom line is we've been able to do studies to save some of those cats by using shelter animals. And then as we always talk to the shelter board, trying to get them to approve a study, is talk about how if we generate usable data, publish that data, then you might have helped 25 cats in a study that then helps cats all around the world. And so what we're trying to do is nip away at those numbers. And obviously the cat elimination issue is a quite big deal. Reagan's talk was so good. I wish I could be a speaker like her. She's just so great at what she does. And bottom line is, it's just so common. I picked a UK study because Andy was going to be here, but anyway, it's the same pretty much all over. A lot of these cats, it's because of elimination. And then probably second most common in most studies is being allergic to the cat, and we'll talk about that in future meetings again, I'm sure. But it really is a One Health issue. It's great to hear all the communication talks and things yesterday as well. I've learned a lot about how to perhaps work a lot more closely with my clients and get accurate information about many things, including obesity. But if you think about what these pets mean to you, I mean, well, let me ask you guys first. Does anybody have more than 5 cats at home, personally? Any have more than 5? Quimby, how many are you up to now? Yeah, so we're 5. Well, that's because we train together, right? So yeah, Quimby and Laughlin have 5. Well, you know, if I had to relinquish one of them, I would be devastated for months. And seriously, I love the cats. Catriona, the bride, she likes the dogs a little bit more, and I like the cats a little bit more. And I'm a mixed animal species. I do dogs and cats. But point is, it is truly a health benefit thing. As some of you guys know, and I think Andy mentioned Wasava, I'm the One Health chair. But if I think about one of our big messages that we're working on right now is the mental health benefits of having healthy cats. And so obviously, I started with things like toxoplasma and, you know, the zoonotic diseases. But if you really think about having a healthy cat without parasites, the benefits to our health is so much more important than the health risks. And so it truly is part of our One Health initiative is to keep pets in the home, zoonosis, allergies, and peeing in the house, or elimination abnormalities, and so it really is a very important thing. I wanted to acknowledge my surgeon wife, those of you that know Catriona. I got interested partially in this subject because of her cat, Luke. So I hate to date myself, but we came together as a couple in 97, and I had 2 cats and 2 dogs, and she had 2 cats and 2 dogs. And so then for the non-Americans, but the Brady Bunch was a TV show that had the 4 kids on, 8 kids living in the household. Well, that cat moved into my house, right, because I was there before her. She's a little bit older than she is, and she showed up, and she's a fantastic human being, really liked her a lot, and she brought Luke, and then we all moved into the same house. Went from 2 dogs, 2 cats to 4 dogs, 4 cats. And Luke started peeing all over the house. Yeah, and it was him. We knew exactly who it was. And he was a relinquishment cat at a local shelter. In his case, he had been found hit by a car, and they took him to the shelter first, and then he was really sick, so they brought him to us because we do their emergency duty at one of the local shelters called Larimer Humane Society. And he lost a kidney, and he had a broken pelvis, and a couple of things. But he worked his way through that. But boy, he was not going to be an indoor cat. He was not going to be an indoor cat. And obviously, I would have relinquished Luke before I would have relinquished Catriona, because she's pretty special first. And I wanted to get that on tape in case one of that back row tells her. It was a big deal, right? And so we've been making lots of inroads now into making cats feel more comfortable, not just at the clinic, but also within our homes. And so, again, making that cat environment a good place. So again, I got to kind of be the last talk today, probably because of my age group, so thank you for letting me come, Natalia. But really, this is a little bit of a soft science talk, because I'm going to show you a couple of different studies, and with a little bit about how we might be able to use calming substances in the future. So I'm going to just show you a couple. But again, why I'm sharing them with you is all the cats in the first 2 bullets were relinquished because of elimination problems. Okay, and the first paper is actually Camille. I think you're over there, aren't you, Camille? There you go. When Camille was training for her nutrition boards, she did this great study on stones in kitties. So we'll talk about that for a second. But just as a summary slide, they were all at the shelter. They all had elimination disorders, and they were all likely to go out the back door because once you write on there, peas in the house, who's going to pick that cat? Yeah, I'm not going to pick that one. I don't know about Andy. You go select them on purpose, hoping that Reagan will do a consult with you? No, seriously, guys. So we set out, again, we were working with a sponsor, of course, and they needed to prove that one of their products worked, and we're quite open to helping companies prove that their products work, provided we get to publish it, whether it worked or not. work at a vet school. And so it was great. So we kind of had the project design. I'll show it to you here in a second, ready to go. And we actually started with the local referring veterinarians, not the shelters. I had this mental picture that all my friends there, and I've been there 30 years, and so I know about 1,500 vets in Colorado, right? You call them up, you send them an email, you send them whatever, and say, hey, we've got this study on cat stones. It'll be great for your client. We'll save them $2,000, blah, blah, blah. And guess how many of them referred a case? None. That's bread and butter, right? A radiodense cat stone. Why would you refer it to us to save the owner $2,000? Now, they would have sent the ones that didn't have any money. Granted, I'll give you that. They would have done that. But it was a slow data entry, right? And it took me a couple of days because I'm a little bit slow. But to remember, I also run the shelter program at CSU with Rebecca Rutt-Galley, and we have an email listserv to about 25 shelter vets. And all it took was, we will take all of your cats that were relinquished because of parayuria and or hematuria, and we will give you a free workup. And now Boulder Humane Society, this is a picture of, no, this one's Larimer, but Larimer and Boulder, they're honestly as nice as the vet school. But many of our rescues and shelters don't have an x-ray machine. They certainly don't have a magic wand known as the ultrasound. And so it was quite easy to offer them the workup because they wanted to know if those cats had a physical disease because we can fix physical diseases right that day, do a little pain med necessarily if it's a stone removal, and then get them rehomed. And so that was really easy. Then we could get cats quite easily once we opened it up to our shelters. And I wanted to share this with you because we got so many great internists and nutritionists in here. I've been teaching the lower urinary tract stuff. I kind of ended up liking pretty much anything infectious and lower urinary, and so I've done that most of my career. And you know how you get the vet students and you get the new team, and then you start staring at UAs with them. And in fact, I just reviewed the VM 749 exam, which they're taking, I think, on Tuesday for the third years. And there's all these urinalysis results there, right, that we're going to quiz them on. And then I read Camille's paper. So let me show it to you for a second. Yeah, so again, these critters that you look at them, and they've got signs of lower urinary tract disease. And wherever my friend Jody is, that was an excellent talk, by the way. Yeah, so you start staring at them, right? And you're saying, well, what does this cat have? And so you look at this and you say, it's concentrated. It's got that pH of 6, a little hematuria. If it turns out that it might have some of those little tiny stones, the 0.5 centimeters or smaller, and you saw that pH, and there's probably a question, right, on the quiz for them on Tuesday. You would say, what radiodense stone? Yeah, it's supposed to be calcium oxalate. I just heard a really good talk on that just a few minutes ago. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be, right? And that's what I was told, right? But the problem is we're doing these one-off UAs, right? It's just a single time point. You guys all know because you're the specialist. But point is that it correlates so poorly. And so we keep teaching it, though. Hopefully, maybe if I turn over my lectures to Dr. Torres Henderson, then she'll fix all my bad lectures. But it's really amazing about how we would look at things like the pH on one urine sample, say it's calcium oxalate, you can't dissolve it, let's cut it out. Am I the only one that's still... I'm probably the only one in the room that was too stupid to learn that already. Hey, if you didn't see it, the catvets.com, they did just put the new Urolith, Cystolith type paper, the algorithm and everything. Congrats for getting that through into the journal. Andy, I think it'll probably be in the physical journal here soon, but just online today, I think. But it's really cool, guys, for some of you guys that, kind of fourth pathway there, the non-surgical pathways, probably many of you guys can do at least some of those things. That wouldn't necessarily be the case for me, but I do have a wife as a surgeon. But point is, we have pathways. But this cat that we would have potentially predicted as a pH of 6 calcium oxalate, it's not going to dissolve, based on this study design, was they all got the diet, right? It's just a name brand diet to dissolve stones in the struvite group and to lessen recurrence of struvite and calcium oxalates. Obviously, we have 3 really good companies that all make a similar diet in that space. But the one that we might have said in the past, let's just go to surgery, there she is 2 weeks later. Yeah, so now we don't know what those cats had in Camille's study. We obviously don't know which ones were struvite for sure, but they went away. They were probably struvite, right? And at least that's what we argued in the manuscript. So again, why I bring it up to a group of specialists is basically I'm trying to help cats that don't or can't afford us, right? What we do for a living. And I'll say it in a few minutes, guys. The punchline for me is I still like to do workups, and I do try to make my best guess. I am still a tertiary care internist, and I got folks like Camille to keep me honest. But once they say I don't have very much money, did you know a bag of cat food in this space? It doesn't have to be Purina, it can be anybody's. They're all three good diets, right? So again, saying product agnostic. Did you know a urinalysis at Colorado State costs more than a bag of cat food? You ever think about it? I mean, in the shelter, right? I'm not talking about what we do. Yeah, we need to try to guess. Use the data to accurately. Oh, wait, we're not accurate either. I'm serious. I stared at those UAs longer than most of you guys because of my age group, and now I'm like, why am I staring at the UA on a single pH, right? And then crystal urea, I know that I would never say the word that starts with S-U-C-K in a professional lecture, but did you know crystal urea and prediction of cat stones also? Thank you. Anyway, Camille, congratulations on your paper. But what we did, guys, is all we did was we just wrote the shelters. And so those of you that are deciding to do an FIC study, and I'm working with one of the residents talking about that stuff right now, use the shelter cats. They need to be helped. They were probably relinquished with a treatable disease. We'll talk stress next, obviously, but they were probably relinquished for a treatable disease. They need to be fixed, and they deserve to be fixed. And it's a great way to get cases that a referring vet that wants to keep that money in the clinic. You don't have to fight that battle. So I really love this kind of stuff. And so we did the regular stuff that all of us would do, and including the aerobic culture and susceptibility. I didn't say it on that summary slide, but we have not cultured a bacterium from the bladder of a cat in a study anyway, because I only know those. I'm not on clinics as much as some of my teammates, but we have not in one of these study cats, an FIC study and the stone study, we haven't cultured a bacterium from any of them in 4 years. And so again, I'd love to, as a judicious use of antimicrobial agents person, I do like to remind people, giving the convenia shot is malpractice. Oh wait, you don't say that on tape either. It is contraindicated to give a convenia shot when you're guessing, and you charge more for the convenia shot than you do for the bag of cat food. Right? So back to do this stuff in a logical pathway, I guess, is what I love to at least chat about with the trainees anyway. And I know you don't need to see it yourself because you already know it. But it's amazing, right? Just like we heard from Jody just a few minutes ago, heck, as we keep entering cats, because we still are entering cats into this is just the part that Camille got through publication. Those ratios, just like your stone analysis at Davis, is running around 40%. They dissolve, right? So they were probably pure struvite. They weren't mixed. And then the ones that we didn't dissolve within 2 weeks, then you cut them out, and they shouldn't have dissolved. And so again, back to a shelter vet study, they still look at you like, oh, wow. You know, we can afford to board them for an extra 2 weeks, right? And so just put them on one of those special cat foods, right? And then see what happens after 2 weeks. Most of them are going to, if they're this size, most of them are going to be responding. And then if you only have 7 days, most of ours that went away, you could tell by 7 days on radiographs. Obviously, with the magic wand, we can be a little bit more accurate per se, but still, they're going to change pretty quickly because they're not a dog stone. This is a cat lecture, right? An infected dog stone that's as big as a golf ball, that's a whole different story. I still just have the wife cut those out, honestly. But a cat lecture, yeah, it's pretty amazing. So congrats again, Camille. Again, you guys know this already, but just to re-emphasize, if you hadn't read Camille's paper, it was a waste of time to look at the UAs. It didn't correlate to anything. pH didn't correlate. What crystal urea was seen, it just didn't predict anything. And so I come right back to, I'd still like to stare at it, I guess, but I probably want to put them on a diet for a couple of weeks rather than take the risk of doing those fancy things that Jody Lulick and Marilyn Dunn can do versus just cut them out. I certainly don't want to cut them out because that's an expensive bill, right? And then a little bit more discomfort. So yeah, it wasn't very predictive. So I'm a big proponent now, even in the tertiary care hat that I wear 12 weeks a year or less, before I think about doing those other things, maybe I should try a bag of cat food. Do you guys think I'm like from Colorado, I'm like smoking dope or something? Or does this make sense? Anyway. All right, so I just wanted to give you that one. I know you've read it already, but to re-emphasize it with the shelter in mind. And so this is a great shelter lecture, in my opinion. I just validate them that you're not probably doing a great job giving them a convenient shot, but you probably are doing a good job giving them 2 weeks of boarding as a gamble on an appropriate diet. So that's that take-home message. So again, nice little paper, small one, but still makes it in as long as it's appropriately discussed. And so congrats, Camille. Well, so then we got excited. Well, what about FIC? You know, those diets are a little bit different. I think you showed John Kruger's paper that we've debated off and on for a while in the FIC space. Well, the sponsor might have been interested in doing some of that work. And so I just told the shelter vets, keep them coming, right? If they have stones, we'll put them on the food for 2 weeks, and if they're still there, we'll cut them out. If they dissolve, then cool. The ones that don't have stones, we'll roll them into an FIC study. What the heck? And so anyway, we did that up till COVID, and then we kind of shut it down because it was just a little bit of a problem. The cats weren't coming to the shelter quite as much, and then obviously the whole hassle because of the SARS-CoV-2 virus just made it not that much fun. But after this meeting, I think we'll be talking to the R&D team as well as the commercial team about, open it back up a little bit. To stay true to my own statement, it's got to be published to show a study. This one has been an ACVIM abstract, and so that's my why I wanted to show it to you. Natalia did the bulk of the work. There's Laurel. How's Laurel doing, Dr. Quimby? Is she doing okay? Excellent. So Dr. Krause was a CSU student that went, and she's now the resident of Dr. Quimby. And then many guys will recognize the Dr. Greco on the other side. She actually designed this study with us. Now, this one's an interesting hypothesis when we first wrote it, and I wanted to share it with you guys because it'll be funny funny to discuss during the panel here in a little bit. One of these diets does have a little bit more sodium than the other two, and that is actually purposeful, and there is potentially a benefit to that, right? If you're not at a dangerous level, which I learned today from Bonagura, maybe they're not that dangerous, but bottom line is if you have a little bit extra sodium, that might promote water drinking. And by the way, this is a dry food study. 2 different dry foods. And so one of the hypotheses that we were trying to assess is that perhaps those cats, since they're little dehydrated camels, maybe that dehydration actually is a stressful thing for them. And so then promoting water consumption with just a taste more sodium might be a good thing. So we were then trying to figure out how to do that, right? It's always tough to do that in these kitties. Well, it wasn't hard to find the cats, right? Because now we got the shelter connection. They're liking the fact that we could do their workups. We actually had a pickup and delivery service, and we'll do that again with the local shelters. Anything we can do to help them out, to let them help their cats and advance the sciences is a good thing. But basically, we just kept them coming. And so if you haven't seen this particular study yet as an abstract, we basically just kept going with the same design that we had before, which was get them from the shelter to us so that we could do appropriate imaging from the tertiary care person standpoint. Bacteriology lab that's about 25 yards or 25 meters from where I would do the cystos on admission, so it's easy to get a good, at least aerobic culture that we trusted. And what we did then on these guys is we then struggled, and please help me with the design thoughts for the future studies, but you know how you try to touch a cat with hematuria, be it due to FIC or whatever. You touch that bladder the second time, they start bleeding again and or pee on the table. So we did decide to go the whole pathway of all the rechecks were free catch. And we did it using a system, a regular litter box system. We just didn't use the absorbent pads. They're at the bottom of this system. We would just let it run through those granules. And the cats actually tactily liked this litter very well, so that was no problems. And so basically what we would do is they'd come in, they'd get randomized into one or the other diets, and then they'd be put into a chamber, again, a group house situation. And then to collect their urine, because our end point in this one, the primary was the hematuria went away. And obviously to enter the study, they couldn't have stones, infection, neoplasia, so that's the magic wand in the culture. So then it was a randomized study, and then they were scored by people that were unbeknownst to the two different diets, and we then every 2 to 4 days recheck their urinalysis. Free catch by having them spend a day with their litter box so we could capture that urine. We did do the webcam in the room. Now we are on a 12-hour light cycle in that area of the research facility, and so we were only looking at them 12 hours a day. We didn't do 24 hours. I think I heard Reagan say she might have looked at them 24. They were in the dark, so we didn't look at those videos when it was dark. So I'm only going to show you the ACVIM abstract because that's the published part. So let me share those data. The final paper, if we go with it now versus enter some more, the trends are all the same, what I'm going to show you right now. But we ended up having 2 cats by the time they actually got picked up from the shelter, make it up to Fort Collins. They had their hematuria resolved. And so there was no hematuria, thus they couldn't be in the study, so they got sent back down. One cat we classified as an Iris 2, and I didn't feel that I could use that type of diet in an Iris 2 kitty, so we went ahead and sent that kitty back down to the shelter on the appropriate diet. Then we had one that developed FIP, or at least it looked like a FIP kitty, that we didn't feel that would have been induced by a diet. And so I felt pretty good about excluding that one. Another stress disease probably, but I didn't feel that it was fair to keep that in the diet, so it got kicked out. As I mentioned, at the time of the ACVM abstract, we had 4 more cats with radiodense stones. And again, they're these, half a centimeter or smaller guys. 2 of them dissolved, 2 of them were cut out by the wife, and they turned out to be calcium oxalates if they didn't dissolve. So here's your one punchline slide that I shared this at ACVIM, so that's all I'm going to share with you today. But basically, we did have, with that small a number, 6 in one group, 7 in the others. I mean, you obviously can't have a positive p-value without exactly those numbers, because if there was just one that shifted, obviously you'd lose the p is less than 0.05. So all of us in the room won't overstate this data. But point is, if you put a cat that was relinquished to a shelter in a nice, clean research room with good litter and good food and all of that, they're going to have their hematuria go away in probably a mean on these guys was about 7 days, which I think Jeannie Barsanti showed, 1986? If they're going to be well in a week if you actually can start lessening their stress a little bit. But it was kind of interesting because we also then looked at specific gravity, right? I mentioned one of the diets had a little bit more sodium, so I wanted to see if the specific gravities were lower in that group. And they were not. Again, probably statistical power on that, so we need a few more cats. I did want to mention that urination attempts, and again, the vet students, paid observers, looked at all those videotapes to see which cat got in the box when. And we did not see a difference in plaquuria because the plaquuria was going away as early as day 3. And then we had one cat, one of the failures. I think it was actually the high sodium group kitty. That one actually had a lot of plaquuria. And then when we switched him over, now this is another 20 days, right? Because now it's an open trial. We just switched him over. He actually got better in the second 20-day period. But again, now you've got a cat that's been there used to his environment. So you're really doing multimodal, right? When we start talking about being there for a long time, being used to the same people, that type of stuff. Then we did have 3 cats that didn't respond in the first 20 days on that alternate, a little bit lower sodium diet. And those kitties, 3 of those 6 actually got better in the next 20 days, but if that's dietary versus just they're used to being there now, and I honestly think we did the Tony Buffington on them. Those cats are now used to being there in a nice, clean environment with minimal stress. But I thought it was kind of an interesting study to this point, and we are happy to continue that. We can talk about all the limitations as we go into the question period, because obviously there are lots and lots of potential limitations in this type of study. But I come right back around to why we're here for this talk is actually about shelter relinquishment, right? Yeah, well, these cats were all relinquished to a shelter. None of them had a bacterial infection. Most of them, all we had to do was put them in a clean, nice place and feed them a good cat food. And perhaps it was good cat food that does something in that space. Obviously, those RSSs are nicely designed, and they're probably not going to get nephrolis, right? Because if we stay on those diets. The ones that we were able to follow after, and both studies, the ones that we were able to follow for a little while, there was no known recurrences of the calcium oxalate kitties and the struvite kitties that were now on forever homes, hopefully. I don't know of any of them bouncing back. But any of you that do shelter studies probably know we do offer all these folks free food for the next 6 months, all that kind of stuff. But you know what they do? They quit answering after a while. You know, they didn't go to the shelter to adopt a cat to be in a study. Yeah, they went to pick up a new friend for the family, right? And so I don't know what that means, because if you lose contact with them, obviously we don't know what that means. But we do know most of the referring vets, and the shelter vets, of course, are all invested in these cats bouncing back as well. And so we feel pretty comfortable that bounce backs were actually pretty small. So when I talk to my friends at the shelters now, and that's fairly frequently, it's like, hey, we got a study going on. You want to send your parauric hematuria cats up? We can help you out, because it's called free, and that's not a bad deal. When the money runs out ultimately, then obviously we won't be able to do that part of it anymore. But I will be able to say, put them in a nice clean room that has no more than 4 cats in it with lots of enrichment, and feed them a cat food before you let them go out the back door. The ones with calcium oxalates are still going to need some help, right? But the struvite ones are the FIC kitties with a little bit of multimodal plus perhaps a diet for a time period. Would hopefully get that forever home. So as we kind of start winding down a little bit for my stuff so we can get on to the question period, I have known Tony, since he's been around for a long time, Buffington, right? So I actually finished up and started drinking that Kool-Aid pretty early. I think Tony was great. And then obviously got the great fortune to have Dr. Westrup as a resident PhD student. So now I get to follow her like I always did Tony. And it's just amazing. I think they make a good story. I really loved that last talk. And so one of the things now that comes up a lot, because we'll debate these stones forever. Obviously, I just showed you 2 studies with dry food. I mean, how many of us give dry food to an FIC cat? But the point is, we continue to gather data on the different diets, because some cats won't eat canned. And then we start looking at other pathways, right? I mean, if FIC is truly a stress disease, and if it's FIC that changes the pH to let struvites come out of solution, we're right back to being stress. And so then that gives us now this whole new avenue, this whole new pathway to consider managing not just the kitties with FIC, or thought to be a idiopathic FIC, but also potentially go in that pathway for cats that reform struvite as well. Do they really have an underlying error in metabolism, or are they just stressed out cats that have this syndrome that's still poorly defined? And Jody will continue to prove what it is over the course of her career. And so it's really an easy thing to talk about right now. As you say, you got a cat peeing blood in the sink, or a cat that had struvites in the past, maybe even calcium oxalates relate to this, as Jody mentioned. Then you start doing your multimodal right up front. And guys, I actually learned that with the shelter animals. I don't know how many of you guys like shelter cats, but I actually learned that with the cat respiratory thing. You know, we showed one of those market-leading probiotics as immune stimulant, you know, and can help perhaps keep a cat and herpes in remission. So we'd done some of that probiotic stuff as well for, you know, assessing the microbiome or influencing the microbiome, perhaps in an immune stimulant pathway. Well, when we were doing that kind of work with the shelter, in fact, it was crazy. We did the same thing. We offered them the opportunity to bring the shelter kitties up from wherever they were being housed. And generally, if you haven't been in shelters, it's often a pretty small medical unit, right? They don't have a ton of space to begin with. So then they take their sick cat and they cram it into a place that's probably, I feel that it would be stressful. And then they sit in there for months. Yeah, you might have seen one of them we did with interferon versus topical vaccine. But point is, what I learned from it and how it ties into today's lecture is we had these cats, and they were down at Denver Dumb Friends League, which is a fantastic shelter in Denver, and they were in the medical unit. To bring them up, to rescue them, to do 2 novel therapies, Morris Animal Foundation funded, that kind of stuff, we needed them, we felt they needed to be in the shelter for at least a month. And so we picked the worst of the worst because we really wanted to test this hypothesis we were going to test, you know, fancy intranasal vaccine immunotherapy. And you know, it was actually human alpha-2 interferon study, high dose, because we don't have Omegagen in America, so we have to use the alpha-2b. But why am I sharing it with you? So we had this great design. Morris even liked it. The shelter board said they'd do it. They had to be there a month. All of those cats had failed doxycycline, clavulanic acid, and lysine, because that's what the shelter vets were doing at the time, right? And some of those things don't do anything for a cat snot case, but that's okay. That's what they were doing. But point is, they'd been there a month on 3 maybes, at least 2 for bacterial, and 1 might do something with the virus. Probably not. Guess how many of them, once we brought them up to a research room that had no more than 4 cats, had triple perches, visual shields, ping pong balls, fake cheese things that they can hide in. Same thing we do with the urinary studies. Guess what proportion of those cats, after being in the shelter for 30 days, dropped below entry criteria within 3? Take a wild guess. Anybody? Andy? I won't put you on the spot. It was 25%. They were in the shelter for a month in a medical unit that actually isn't a bad medical unit, but just getting them into a better environment, in this case, multiple perches and all the stuff I just stated. So I have drank the Kool-Aid, and it's fun in my life because I get to do a little bit of urinary stuff and still doing the herpes thing. Not personally, but the cat herpes thing. It's amazing, right? The whole kind of thoughts about how to manage both of these syndromes are great. So thank you for the table, Jody, so I get to use it in my vet student lectures all the time. So remember Luke? Yeah, you can barely see him on these film. He's a little bitty kitty. Well, all of that is because of Luke. Yeah, I like Catriona a lot, right? And if I got rid of the cat, she was going to dump me. So I had to try something, right? So yeah, so we actually did the first thing was right behind the little shed there, the wall. That's the sun porch. And it used to be my sun porch, and then these other animals moved in. And then we turned that into the cat sun porch, and that actually helped. He actually did do a little bit better because that way we had all 4 cats away from all 4 dogs, and they had perches and their litter boxes and all that stuff were there. But he was still causing some problems. So then that's where the cat house came from, and that's just a Home Depot shed. But I actually bought that shed for, what are they, $800 or something? And so I bought that shed, they delivered it out there. And so my next chore was to make a hole into the sun porch so they could go from their sun porch into the cat house. And again, I was a neophyte at this. I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing. And that seemed to help a little bit. But then somebody told me, well, Mike, you only had 3 windows on the cat house. You have 4 cats. Not kidding. So I put in a 4th window. That still didn't quite fix it, but it really was. When I did the Fred Sanford and Son run, then it all stopped. He just needed to go outside, and then he was fine. He didn't urinate in the house another time, even though we didn't rip out all the carpet until he was dead. I wasn't going to take the chances, but that's all it took. But what I don't understand is why he then, when he goes out there and eats grass and stuff, and they can go back into the house, and then the bedroom's, right next to the wood pile there, why when he pukes up the grass, it's always on my side of the bed? I'm the one that it just doesn't seem, no, seriously, guys. And then Jenny Scone, everybody laughs about Jenny because a number of you guys have seen her on her cat wheel, but and she's a little bit tubby. If you just ignore the kibble, please. Yeah, that's why they only let me talk about probiotics when I come to Purina stuff. They won't let me talk about nutrition because I'm not very good. But seriously, guys, it works. It works, and it works for cat snot. It works for cat respiratory disease. It works for FIC, in my opinion. And so it takes very little to stress a cat, and I didn't know any of that, and thanks to the folks at Purina for doing the microbiome work in this study, and thanks to Jan for doing many of our other collaborative studies with us. But it doesn't take much. Just changing how they're housed, probably just moving their dadgum couch at your house is going to change the GI microbiome in some kitties, and it's really cool, as you start learning stuff like that, you can block some of that out with good name brand probiotics like we did in this study, I think was on Enterococcus faecium, SF68. But point is it doesn't take much stress. And now if you believe in a gut-brain axis, not just a gut and immune system and all the other things we're studying and getting to talk about at these great forums, it's amazing knowing that stress might actually do something. And stress relieving substances might help. And so that's one of the things our team has done a bit of over the last number of years. Jonathan, you're here somewhere, right, still? Hey, Jonathan. Jonathan gets to work with Dr. Contreras. She was one of our PhD students at CSU, and Siva wanted to see if their stuff worked, right? It was a facial pheromone one, and we were able to show increased relaxation scores, et cetera, if you had an appropriate designed room, the right cubic feet. If you try to do a 3,000 square foot house, right, with one diffuser, it's probably not going to work. But if you do a 10 by 12 by 12 room, it actually does something. And so where I wanted to leave you guys with today is really start thinking about, I like still the hypothesis of a little bit extra sodium. We'll have to continue to explore that hypothesis with that one diet. But now we know we've got pheromones might help kitties. Tearing a hole in your house wall definitely can help. Get them a giant $200 cat wheel. They actually use it. And then other things in the nutrition space. And my challenge to the companies that make these things is we'll prove it. And so hopefully over the course of time now we'll see that as another pathway, right? Doing food additives, some of the natural substances that increase relaxation or decreases things like anxiety. And so I'm going to close today with just one more little bit of a discussion. I didn't know anything about anything in the Bifidobacterium longum group. Now I'm understanding. Now I knew a little bit about probiotics, and even different strains within the same genus and species were important. Like SF68 of Enterococcus faecium does some stuff that other Enterococci might not. But this one, BL999, one of the ones that folks have been studying. You just saw Reagan, so that was her work with the dog product that's in that space, BL999. We've done the work now with kitties. We can't share it with you today just because we're waiting for the final acceptance from a famous journal. Hopefully it will come this week. Didn't quite make it for today's lecture. But point is that, again, that gut-brain barrier and this syndrome, the bladder syndrome, might be that pathway to try. If a urinary diet is not needed long-term or is not being effective, then that pathway of trying to lessen stress in the nutritional space will be one of the things I know that we'll all probably be designing studies and trying over the next and coming months. So we look forward to sharing more data in other venues here in the near future. If you're interested in the cat work, it was in the internal medicine abstract last year. But again, we'll share more data in more of a talk that's not agnostic to products. But again, that BL organism is pretty amazing. Gosh, did you know there's a Bifidobacterium longum that also decreases itching? Yeah, this is going to be a big part of our life, right, in the futures. You know, and I always look at it when we're trying to get the grants, of course, as well as thinking about it as a drug person, a person that prescribes drugs, because I'm an internist, and those drugs often have side effects. But, you know, man, if I could lessen side effects by using less drugs or less Apoquel or less Cytopoint injections, you know, all that stuff's just fantastic. So I hope to keep having the opportunity to work in the nutrition space. And it is, as an internist, it's truly a Luddite in nutrition. To get to hang with you guys over these meetings is fantastic. And thank you so much to the organizers and the professionalism that you guys show in these types of meetings. So if we can move the bar, this collective group can move the bar from part of my life that I actually am somewhat knowledgeable, keeping cats in homes. Let's go for it. Thanks again for letting me come, guys. Appreciate it.